everyone. This is another Freedom to Feel conversation, and my guest today is Judy Koons. She is a spiritual speaker and author at door.co. She has been supporting individuals to come back to true health, health mentality, emotionally, physically, and spiritually for decades. So it's interesting. I read this before, but I didn't realize. So health in a sense of mental, spiritual, emotional, and physical, all around. So I already have a question for you here. So I love the freedom process. So you use the freedom process with individuals choosing to end the war within and come back to the magic of life and effortless mastery. What's not to love about
Mm.
that? So your book, this is your first book, right, Judy?
This is my
Spellbound.
first, yes, my first published book, yes.
So it's Spellbound No More, Live a Superordinary Life by Design. It will be released on Amazon January 21st. So this is my brief intro of you, but there's a lot more to you. We've been talking off record. I could talk to you for decades, ages really, about all the spiritual good stuff. But before the full bio will be at the end. But the question that I love asking all my guests from the get go, the opening question per se, is how would you describe who you are in this very moment?
I would describe myself as a woman who tends to sit with the bees in the garden,
Yeah.
someone who doesn't really play with labels.
Mm,
The only reason that I would play with labels is just to be able to relate.
yeah.
Uh, I have a tendency to just show up for others, and I'm all about allowing them to use me to bring forth the trueness in them. So that's been my calling for a very long time, and I continue to do that. And through the book, I hope that the frequency comes
Mhm.
through in that way where it really is about the reader, about the individual that recognizes that they're not separate from anything or anyone
Mm,
else.
mm, yeah.
So I'm very simple. Again, I'll sit with my bees probably before I do anything else. The bees, because they don't, yeah, they do
I
their
love
own thing.
I love that. Yes.
Yeah.
How did you uncover this way of being a human in this reality in the way that you just described?
Well, it was a journey. I started so many years ago recognizing that I was dealing with chronic illness in my
Yeah.
physical body. So I
Yeah.
spent a lot of time working through many techniques, modalities, therapies, etc. But nothing ever was sustainable or effective.
Right.
At one point, I did the Rolfing training. It's a myofascial release technique, and it's all based in yogic practices
Yeah.
and all of that, but it's more than that because it's really about releasing all the holding
Right.
that's stopping us from expressing properly. So that concept started really catching my attention.
Mm,
And then when I came into somatic work or the continuum work that I did in the physical body, it translated into everything else in my life, especially the mental, emotional, and spiritual as well. So there
yeah.
was this natural design that was at the center of us. But there was a lot of accumulation on the outside. And that's what spellbound is to me. Spellbound is having so much accumulation that the trueness of you isn't able to be
Mm,
expressed properly.
mm, yeah.
So when that started really clicking, life started shifting for me. And there was
Yeah.
all sorts of things, ancestral pieces and life pieces that came into my awareness. And how could I come back to the nature of self?
Mm,
All I needed to do was find out what was in the way, and then I wasn't seeking anymore. So I went
mm,
from being a very dedicated seeker
yeah.
to recognizing that seeking was distracting me
Right.
from self, from
Right.
the oneness of self. And
Mm,
so the seeking, it took me a while to recognize all the different ways and all the very subtle ways that I was seeking. But before I knew
right.
it, I was not needing to look anymore because I'd found it.
Right.
What was already there had revealed itself and continues to reveal
Mm,
itself. It's
mm,
an ongoing refining process if we stay in these physical bodies.
mm.
And I'm not trying to get rid of the physical body or the
Yeah.
identities or the egos or however you want to say it, but there's a um, we call it a release from the illusion,
Mm,
where the illusion becomes weaker, where the truth isn't
mm,
necessarily found in that. It can be expressed more than looked for or
mm,
recognized or
mm,
anything. It just becomes what we are and what we do.
mm.
It's an amazing process, this journey that we all go on. And the journey has brought me to here where my focus is helping others on their journey, not them following my journey, but for me to help them to draw forth within them what's trueness for them, not what I think is true for them, not
Mm,
what their parents thought was true for them, not what society thinks is true for them, but what's been within them all along.
mm. Yes, gosh, there's so much there that you just said. And that makes me wonder about, these the nature of truth. Is there one ultimate truth, or there are many truths? And we are speaking of the truth at the level of the body you mentioned, which to me that's nature. That would be nature because we are not apart from nature,
No,
the body
no,
and mind.
definitely we're not apart from nature. We are nature. There's been a level of separation and disconnection,
Yeah,
and there's different degrees for everyone.
right, right.
But when it comes to truth, so I kind of break it down. You'll hear me say trueness.
Yeah, yeah,
So to me, the trueness is the
yeah,
light. That's the
yeah.
core of all.
Mm,
That's the
yeah,
core of oneness.
yeah.
And then truth,
Mm,
I have a
mm.
truth that I put pen to paper.
Yes.
That's my own personal way that I express.
Yes.
It's a personal way that the light comes through
Mm,
and expresses through. So I get
mm,
to share with others. Those are truths.
right.
The trueness is something that's immutable. It isn't able to be
Mm,
corrupted
mm.
or diminished in any way. So the
Yes.
trueness of you recognized gets to animate those truths in whatever way that
Mm,
this is playing the game. So I break it down a little bit just so that we not so that we can separate it out, just so that we can talk about it
right.
and then we can clean it up so that it all fits back together
Right.
really
Huh.
cleanly.
Yeah, I love the way you said that too. All comes back together. I just interviewed somebody, Darlene Vandergrift. She's timeline designer, like an architect of realities, like really interesting things. And then she looked at this mandala back here and she said, that might be you trying to put your pieces together because you talk a lot about wholeness and this, the broader view of life. But at the same time, you have that flower of life that looks like pieces. So, yes, this concept is very interesting that we are trying to bring the infinite into the finite. That's what it feels to me, Judy. And I don't know if this is, we're just using language. It's so hard to express these things with language, right? But I can't help it but have this interest, this heartfelt interest in freedom. Like, what is to be free in a sense, like we talked off record, being here just for the sake of being here. And like a flower is not trying to be a flower. It just is. And right, blossoms beautifully and just shows its beauty and then vanishes again. Isn't that what we are trying to do with the body mind? Is that what we are trying to do actually? That's a question.
That's a great question. I think everyone's going to come from that a little bit differently.
Yeah. Right, right,
Some of
right,
us
right, right.
are coming in
Mm,
and playing into this projection in a way where we're here to help others.
yeah.
Others come
Um,
in
right,
and they're here for a short time.
right.
And then it's just like flowers. They're
Mm,
going to express differently. There's
yeah,
some flowers that bloom all the way from spring until
yeah,
fall, and then there's some it's like
yeah.
you ought to catch
Mm,
them at that exact
mm,
right moment.
mm.
So it's so individual for each of
Huh.
us.
Yeah,
But when I back it up a little bit, I'm looking at how the the energy, the source energy, and I tend to call that gold frequency
yeah,
or God.
yeah,
God to me is it's that expansive energy of existence.
yeah.
So energy existing, energy expanding at
Mm,
the core level means that there's going to be all sorts of ways it's going to express.
right.
But that
Huh.
frequency is throughout everything. And so when we're talking about coming back to the trueness of self, it's like the gold frequency is calling back those
Mm,
distortions.
yeah.
But not only that, the gold frequency is within everything. So even within the distortion, there's
Mm,
there's a calling back to purity
mm, yeah,
always.
yeah,
So we're
yeah.
living that. That's why we're drawn to these pieces that allow us to come to greater freedom. So freedom
Yes.
to me is this ability to fully express in that
Mm,
moment
mm.
exactly what
Hmm.
that energy is expanding out into,
Yeah.
and not having a whole bunch of pieces in the way of that.
Right.
So it's like looking at a light bulb and seeing that light bulb and it's bright with just the clear glass on it. But then you start putting covers on it and more covers and more covers and more covers on it, and pretty soon it's not overly bright in the room,
Right.
and but the light is still there.
Right. Right.
So when we release all the spellbinding, all the accumulation, then
Mm.
whoa, bright light. Talk about art
Mm.
coming forth, music coming forth
Yeah.
in so much brilliance
Mm.
and depth and
Mm.
breadth of expression.
Yeah.
I think that's what is energy expressing itself in an expansive way.
Mm.
And we're just doing it through this, the way we see life, in the way that we express life. So
Right.
if we're wanting to really get out of our own way
Yeah.
with the ego or the identity, again, I don't try and eliminate identity because I think identity brings in some real fun. Like
Yeah. Mm.
sometimes identity brings in humor in a way that I don't
Yeah.
know, just light would do,
Yeah.
or it brings it in with a different flavor.
Mm.
But to be controlled by identity is not to be able to express that innate
Mm.
energetic, expansive energy as cleanly as we could. And how
Mm.
can we express it fully, because we are in these bodies.
Yes.
We're
Yeah.
connecting with these bodies. We're projecting these bodies, and
Right.
yet the energy can come through. And I'm all about making it
Yeah.
practical,
Right.
because we can spend so much time in these concepts in our minds,
Right.
but how do we bring it
Right.
back into the body
Right.
that we can communicate with as
Mm.
to how tied up we are.
Mm. Yeah.
So if I'm feeling tension in my body, I know
Mm.
in that moment that there is some accumulation, some spell binding.
Right.
The absence of tension in the mind and the emotion in the body and the spiritual
Mm.
connection, that lets me know that I'm in the flow.
Mm. Yeah.
And so I can use the body, because otherwise I spend so much
Yeah.
time in the mind, and the mind is what causes us to have most of this accumulation in the way. So we can't see the
Mm.
brilliance.
Yeah.
So I'm coming back into the body, undoing, revealing um, the trueness.
Yeah.
And then I get to see how it shows up.
Mm.
My relationship is better.
Mm.
My
Right.
relationship with myself is better,
Right.
with others.
Right.
I know that I'm owning responsibility for the projection that I'm
Mm.
sending out or that
Mm.
I'm
Mm.
creating. So
Yeah.
now I don't have to be caught in all that blaming and giving credit and rejecting. Now I can bring it all home and I can shift the energy if I want to see something different.
Mm.
So
Yes.
one thing that's very, very clear for me
Yeah.
is that energy does not lie. There's no
Right.
way for energy to lie. So if you're taking a look
Right.
around you and you're not liking the energy that's happening there, energy
Mm,
can only it can
mm,
only meet itself.
right.
So as soon as
Ah,
we
ah,
recognize that the
yeah.
energy is meeting itself, whoa, who's responsible for the energy?
Yeah,
We are. All four fingers, all eight fingers, and two thumbs pointing back. I can shift the energy. So I can spellbind myself
yeah.
and hold myself back and make myself small, but I'm
Mm,
also the one that can unbind myself. I can reveal the
mm,
trueness of self so that I can show up cleanly, clearly, available, present in this
mm,
moment,
mm,
recognizing that that's the only one
mm.
that's available to me.
Yeah,
No
good.
more trying to control, no
Mm,
more trying to judge, no more trying to give
yeah,
meaning to something that is, again, just story. And we spellbind ourselves with stories.
right,
All sorts of stories spellbind us.
right.
But stories can also be useful for unbinding ourselves.
Mm,
We can use those stories to recognize where that tension is,
right.
where all that accumulation lies. And as soon as we do that, whew, fireworks, amazing.
Mm,
Health, self healing improves. What we've done
right.
is shift the environment. If we shift the environment, what we see shifts, what we experience shifts, how we
Mm.
experience it shifts. There's freedom right there. I can change the energy anytime I want.
Wow, and that's not control, right, Judy? That's not
Mm-mm.
trying to control the flow of energy, even. Um, that's a fascinating concept too. I say a concept because not everyone is, let's say, it has not become an experience for everyone.
Right.
Has been my case too. That as much as I try to shift energies around me, I always wondered if there was perhaps, like the divine itself trying to have that experience. So for me, it became very important not to push anything away, because the more I did, the more bound I became to the I create a relationship. The more I tried to fight is something. So how do we do that? So the question is, how do we learn not to fight, not to create a relationship with fear, for example? That's a big one for most of us.
Well, fear is going to be projected at us because we've been living with it for so very long.
Right, right.
So, number one, to let go of the idea that we can eliminate fear.
Mm, yeah,
It's
yeah,
it's not something that's going to go away anytime soon.
right.
But number two, we have this amazing technology, and there's this. It's called cranial sacral rhythm. It goes up the spine and around the brain, and then comes back down the spine to the
Uh,
tailbone, to the sacrum.
uh, yeah.
What I use is a somatic move. And it's a breath move where you're actually breathing into the sides of your body.
Mm,
So when you do that, you're engaging with your primary pulse, which is that cranial sacral rhythm.
right,
And as you're breathing into the sides of your body, you recalibrate. So you come out of fight, flight, or fear. So most of us spend most of our time in fight, flight, fear, or fawn
right,
because that mechanism in our bodies has been triggered.
right.
Now, as soon as I breathe into the sides, I have the ability to recalibrate, come out of fight, flight, fear, or fawn. And now I'm back into flow.
Mm,
If you have tension, chances are there's energy that's been caught in your system from fear
mm,
or even
mm,
overexcitement. That can cause energy to be caught. As soon as you breathe into the sides, you activate all the systems in your body, and that energy starts moving, going back into the flow, and it allows for a whole bunch of space to be created so that nature,
mm,
that source that's within us, can recalibrate, can reorganize. So then I'm not distracting with what practices I need to do today. I'm not distracting with the thoughts that tell me that I'm not good enough, or I haven't
Okay.
done enough, or I'm never going to, or I don't have enough, or all
Mm.
those thoughts.
Yeah.
I'm out of that. I'm now back into the body so that I'm not reinforcing that energy that's caught.
Right.
So I'm bringing myself back into the flow through the technology that I'm, projecting essentially. But that breath into the sides is very different than the breath into the front of the body or into the chest, or holding the breath or using breath techniques that can manipulate the physiology. I'm literally asking us to come back to the most basic thing
Mm.
that we start this
Mm.
projection with.
Huh.
And that in turn allows for uh, nature to reorganize. Like if there's a storm that comes through the area,
Yeah.
we don't have to go out and tell the plants how to do that. We don't have to
Right.
tell them how to
Right.
keep growing. We don't have to tell them how
Okay.
to heal themselves. We don't have to do that.
Yeah.
So as soon as we come
Mm.
out of, oh, this is how you can heal yourself,
Mm.
I will not
Mm.
play with that. There's a healer here.
Yeah.
There's a self healing ability that's nature oriented.
Mm.
But to put it
Mm.
outside of self is to deny this as nature.
Right.
So even to put the divine outside of ourselves is to
Mm.
deny that
Mm.
source is what is animating this in the first place.
Mm.
So it's not about
Yeah.
looking outside of ourselves. We're coming out of that seeking as cleanly as absolutely possible at any point.
Gosh, I
We're
love
using
that.
technology of this. The body doesn't lie. If there's tension there,
Yeah.
then there is something in the way of the flow
Mm.
of energy. And that's what source is all about, is that energy.
Yeah.
And if I can get myself back in the flow, then what happens is the reorganizing happens and my life shows up differently because the energy has been shifted and energy will only meet itself. That's how we look at quantum physics that way. We
Yeah.
look at it, it's all been, so I don't want to go into science a whole lot. When I talk to some of the most profound scientists that I know in my life, they're like in total agreement that science is in its baby
Mm. Mm.
space.
Yes.
There's a whole bunch
Yeah.
of things happening
Yeah.
still already that we don't
Yeah.
have tests to prove that are
Right.
going to happen.
Right.
So it's how can you go past that back into the energy that's giving you information all the time,
Right.
and then allow that to reveal itself to you. So it
Right.
isn't about going out and
Mm.
understanding more concepts, or it's about allowing it to show up from within
Huh. Huh.
where all that source energy has been all the time.
Right. Gosh. I mean, it resonates 100% everything you're saying, especially when we are kind of investigating the body itself and the mind, how they operate. It's their own nature. I mean, like in nature itself, it has their own mechanisms, their way of. That's what science is very much a beautiful resource because it's
Mhm.
how it works, and then now you know how to manipulate or do this or that. Um, for me, it's been tricky to do that because I tend to always go back to. Well, I'm a student of Vedanta, which is Advaita Vedanta, which is a non-dual philosophy from. It's a Hindu, very systematic. It's almost like science and spirituality coming together. So basically, we know that we are not the body and the mind. The body mind belongs to nature, belongs here. So the challenge for people like me, it would be to not even to believe, but to try to align these energies with the, like, again, the infinite, the finite with the infinite. That is because we are already it. Everything is happening in the infinite. So it's almost like the infinite, if it was a ball, everything's happening in it. So it's not like there's everything is completely permeated. It's soaked in the infinite already. So that's hard for me to kind of try to Oh, okay, I don't know if that um if that resonates with you somehow. It's really not easy for me to try to separate the infinite from the finite. It's all connected. It's all infinite basically. There's just the infinite. There's nothing else.
Always. The infinite runs through all things. And just like I was sharing in the beginning, when we look at the distortions, okay, we look at someone who is struggling or suffering, and there's a lot of distortion going on,
Yeah.
whether it's
Yeah.
misaligned thinking, whether it
Yes,
is,
psychological, emotional.
yeah, it could be
Mm,
physical, it could be all of those pieces. But
yes.
within the distortion is that infinite.
Yeah,
So the
that's it.
distortion is not separate from the infinite,
No, no.
but within the distortion is the infinite, and the infinite is calling back the distortion. It's
Mm,
calling back
mm,
the distortion back to infinite. But the infinite is
mm,
always expanding.
yeah.
So it's a beautiful
Uh,
play, a beautiful
yeah,
dance with the
yeah.
distortion and the infinite that allows
I,
um, all of that expression
yeah.
to be a part of the expansion.
Mm,
So even the struggle, even the suffering can be a way that that energy expands. And when
mm,
that energy
mm,
expands,
mm,
then again, we're
yeah.
still being called back to infinite within
Mm,
every distortion,
mm,
but it's not separated out.
mm,
So it's not, okay, I'm in the flow, okay, I'm,
yeah. Yes.
misaligned over here.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's the flow is all through it. There just
Mm,
happens to be some covering over it that stops us from seeing the infinite in that moment.
right.
But that's the practical side of the work that I do is, where are the tensions, known or unknown?
Yeah.
If I can help you
Yeah.
recognize that, and
Mm,
you can use the breath, the technology of the body to get that energy moving again, then what happens is the coverings, the overlays, all the patterning, all of that, they actually fall away on their own if we create space.
yeah.
So by creating space,
Yeah.
we're giving ourselves back to that infinite within all of
Mm,
those coverings. And if we do the uh, the work to create space, it's something to do, really, because
yeah.
eventually the infinite would call back the distortions anyway.
Right.
But it gives us something to
It's
play
not
with.
waiting. Yeah, it's not.
No,
It's not waiting for
it's not.
anything to happen. Right.
Yeah.
Let's put that way.
Let's just
Yeah.
make that very, very clear that it would
Yeah.
happen anyway, but
Yeah.
there's a way for you to come out of the, how much more contrast do you really need? If you've been
Mm,
struggling or suffering to any
yeah.
degree, how much more do you need to
Yeah.
recognize that you don't love being played with that
Mm,
way, that you
mm,
don't love playing in the game that way? So
yeah.
we can use creating space to allow all that distortion to fall away. Infinite is hanging out. We're ready for something more expansive for
Mm,
us,
yeah.
whatever that is for us.
Mm,
And in that moment that we've given it back, we've created the space, we've made room for all that accumulation to drop away. Infant has reorganized it already.
uh,
It's expanded out already.
yeah.
And is there any separateness from? I want to back up a little bit. There isn't any separation in my experience from self and infinite.
Right. Right.
So if we think about infinite reorganizing, infinite self is
Mm,
reorganizing,
mm,
and it's okay with identity coming in and say, yeah, well, the next thing I would like to play with is, acrylic paints.
yeah. Yes.
It I don't think it's attached to how we
Yeah.
express
Mm,
in this
right.
world, this
Right.
projection, this illusion, this game. We could call it any one of those, whatever one works for you.
Yeah.
But it's not attached to that. And how can we come closer to that? By being detached, not
Mm,
neutral. Neutral isn't what I'm talking about. Being detached is, it's that unconditional loving that says, I get to create, and I don't have to judge for what I'm creating, and
Mm.
I don't have to give it meaning,
Yeah.
and I can allow it to flow,
Mm.
and I can let it be free.
Yeah.
It's arms wide open, inviting, welcoming, allowing all of those pieces that are available to
Mm.
us. So it's not like we're separate. And where can we find that? Well, as soon as you believe in separation, you're going to find tension in your
Ah,
body, in your
yes.
mind, in
Yes,
your
Judy.
emotions.
Yeah.
And how can
Yes.
you turn around, recognize that tension,
Yeah.
breathe into the sides of your body,
Mm.
create space so that that accumulation, that spell binding can be, it
Mm.
just falls away. It literally lets you go.
Yeah.
And
God.
now you're left in that
Mm.
energy of expansion, that energy of flow, free to
Mm.
express in the way you express without having to be at war with yourself or war
Mm.
with others or
Mm.
war with things.
Yeah.
It's just not necessary anymore. Again, we've already had enough contrast. My
Mm.
guess, everyone listening here has
Yes.
already had enough contrast in their life to last them
Yes.
many lifetimes. So come back to your
Absolutely.
breath. Come back to yourself through your breath. The breath
Mm.
is a doorway. It's a doorway back to self. Because if you do it, eventually, that's why we call it a living practice. It's not something that
Yeah.
you're going to have to do for the rest of your life. You do,
Yeah.
you breathe, you create enough space, enough accumulation has dropped away. All of a sudden, you're in that flow, and it's not like the accumulation comes back.
Right.
So you automatically have dropped most of the patterning around breath, which is
Yeah.
holding your breath, breathing really shallowly, really controlled, really high, really low, all of
Mm.
that. Those are just overlay patterns.
Right.
At the base of you is this breath into the sides where each rib moves independently up and out to the side a little bit. And it engages every single system in this physical body that we're playing with.
Yes.
So as soon as you are back to that original patterning, whew, magic, absolute magic, because that's happening all the time. So there's no way for accumulation to build up anymore. And you'll still get caught by things. You'll still be triggered,
Yeah.
and you
True.
can go back to consciously breathing into the sides. So it makes it extremely simple. Like, no more complicated, no more looking
Mm. Yeah.
for anything outside of yourself anymore. But yet, you
Mm.
didn't have to let go of the ego. You didn't have to eliminate any illusion. You're
Mm.
sitting in that space. You're sitting in that space where before you
Mm.
know it, you recognize that you're not breathing, that
Right.
you're being breathed.
Mm.
What?
Yeah. Yeah.
You mean
That.
I'm not responsible for doing that? No,
Mm.
actually,
Mm.
no.
Yeah.
In my
That's it.
experience, that's a bit of a jump
Yeah.
when we think that if we don't breathe, we will die.
Yes.
And yet there's a step across process where we can breathe, and it brings us to the realization of that.
Mm.
It brings us closer to the realization that freedom is innate, that we are love, that we are powerful, that it's all contained in that infinite,
Mm.
expansive energy of existence.
Mm. Gosh, what's not to love about that? All of that.
It makes it a little easier when you're thinking about life.
Yeah.
Whoa, I
Gosh.
don't even have to do that.
Yeah. Yeah. I love simple and I love clarity. And that's what you're bringing. Yeah. Simplicity, clarity. You talk about accumulation. I think about I thought about the body for some reason that, I have heard that the body is just food rearranged and the accumulation of a rearranged food. That's basically it. What else could that be? Could this be? Um, oh, Judy, I can't help it. But behind you, there's a lot of sparklings. Like it's beautiful, though. I'm wondering how did this happen? Is light coming in through the window, and then behind you, there's like colorful
There
sparkles of
there
energy.
is. There's a prism
It's
hanging in the
beautiful.
window, and the sun just happens
Ah,
to be at a perfect point right now to bring those
ah.
in.
Oh, I've been looking at them. Sorry, I was like listening to you and looking at them at the same time. Like, wow, I love those. I was wondering if you just placed them there, but it just happened. They just happened to be.
It's just perfect timing
Aha.
today. I love the
Yeah.
play of light.
Yeah.
It shows
That,
me what this
ah,
is capable of.
yeah.
So
Right. Right.
the way that the light plays is the way
Right.
that I can play as well. And it just
Mm.
reminds me of that. So I like to play with light that way.
Yeah, that's a beautiful reflection of that. Yeah, it just happened to be. I was mesmerized by them, hypnotized by them.
Sometimes it goes all through the room and all the way
It's
down the hall to
beautiful.
the other end of the house. It's wonderful.
Yeah, it's beautiful. Um, so before I could talk to you forever and ever and ever because this is one of my favorite topics. The dance of the infinite within the finite, and which there's no finite anyway. So we are just kind of basically having a beautiful dance here, and why not enjoy it? That's the whole. That goes back to that again. Maybe that's why the intuitively that came to me, fit for joy, because I was in the fitness industry and I was so unhappy. The body was just crumbling, the mind was everywhere, depressed, and then all of the sudden, that came into that insight came into me. You're already fit for joy. You're already there. It's almost like when you say about accumulation and nature. So we are nature, and it will find its way back to harmony. It always does. Just take a look in nature how it works after disasters, natural disasters. What happens? Even with human resiliency, that also reflects that how nature is always seeking harmony, which means
Mhm.
coming back together as a whole. Right? It's amazing how it's so obvious that we don't need to study. I mean, there's a lot of science behind it and all that, but it's so simple that anyone can just recognize it. Wait a minute, we're just if we are sad, you just wait a moment, and then you see what will happen. Like you said, if you go within, something happens, and it just kind of shows you the way out of that sadness, if that's what you want. So it just it fascinates to me that we don't see the simplicity of this, which we call life. It's very simple, actually. So talk to me about your offerings. I know you have a free membership through your website, and also the practitioner programs too. Do you do one-on-one workshops? I would love to know more about that too, Judy.
At door.co, we have the complimentary membership for anyone who wants to really be part of a community
Yeah.
that is very much freedom oriented, very much about expressing themselves. I always say I'm quite selfish in that we're all playing in the same sandbox. I want
Yes.
to play with really cool people.
Yes.
So that really is behind what I'm doing. And when you come into the membership, you can find freedom process tracks. You can participate in a couple of complimentary offerings that we do. I do freedom talks every couple weeks.
Yeah.
Team members I have a team that I work with, and Jenny works with the freedom process. So she does that complimentary every couple weeks. And then we have programs that are all about learning how to do somatics
Mm,
as well in the physical
yeah.
body.
Yeah.
We have offerings that are happening on an ongoing basis. I have a practitioner program that I offer that is all about using foods and supplements. I really believe
Mm,
that foods and
yeah.
supplements present energetic signatures.
Yeah.
And so we use those energetic signatures to bring the noise down so that you can
Yeah.
literally have an
Mm,
intimate conversation with the body.
mm,
And then I also offer a facilitator program for the freedom process.
yeah.
So it's all available at door.co inside the community.
Right.
I try and make sure that there's lots of pieces on YouTube that you can play with. If you're
Yeah.
not quite sure you want to enter so many communities these days, I get it. I want everyone to remember that you following your feet is going to be the most important thing. Trying to
Mm,
think it out, that's just playing with more distortion.
yeah.
So if you
Yeah.
come into the community, welcome. We know that you followed your feet in there. Honestly, you followed your feet in there anyway,
Mm.
even if the mind was trying to do things.
Right.
But it's available and we're there to support in any way. There's one on one practitioners, facilitators. We've got as much support as we can offer you.
Yeah.
And uh, there's always somebody available. within that community.
Right. That's wonderful to know. The somatic part of it's very interesting too. That kind of calls me the body here. It's interesting. I have some pain here and there, and I always talk to the body and I ask, "Why are you in pain?" And sometimes I cry. So that just without, I don't know exactly why. Well, I do have an idea, but I try not to judge or kind of go deeper into it. But this is a very interesting piece. Like, I find everything fascinating, just the dance again of the body doing what it does, finding harmony again. And the faster, the better, right, Judy? The quicker we find the harmony, the better it is.
Well, like you shared earlier, nature is going to call itself back to
Oh, yeah.
itself.
Yeah.
And we can either fight that or we
Mm,
can flow
yeah.
with it. We can work
Right.
with it.
Yes.
And at
Yeah.
Door, we're not
Yeah.
trying, we are. We are working with that. We're riding along on that wave of it calling itself back to itself. So we're doing everything we can to help you recognize where you're in your way,
Mm,
where those tensions are known and unknown
yeah.
in every aspect of life, so that you are free to express
Mm,
from this
mm,
incredibly powerful place within yourself that's
yeah.
always been there.
Yeah.
We don't have to give our power away, and no one can take it.
Mm,
We
yeah.
literally just get to recognize where we're, shipping it out sideways instead of owning it and living
Yeah.
into it. So your
Yeah.
ability to come into the somatics is exactly that. The
Mm,
somatics is about using the body the way it was designed to move and coming
mm,
back into those intrinsics in a way that you're not just working from external musculature in this physicalness,
right.
but you're completely, we call it equanimity,
Mm,
where the intrinsics are as strong or as connected as the extrinsics, the external tissues. And
right.
it allows you to release all of that
Mm,
holding in the physical body in whatever way it showed up. So it's about releasing or making space for the accumulation to drop away in the physical body as well. We're about that all the way across the board. It's like, let's recognize where the accumulation and spellbinding is, and let's create space so that it can fall away, so that
mm,
reorganization can happen, and I can show up so clear and
mm,
so available and so
mm,
ready for life in whatever aspect I'm doing, whether it's my mission, my work, my parenting, whether it's with my lover, whether it's, with climbing the closest mountain,
mm.
my fitness, everything. There's not one aspect of life that we leave untouched.
Right. Gosh,
Yeah.
what a beautiful invitation. That
Mm.
inspires me. I mean, every time I have conversations like this, I feel so inspired. I just want to do it all. I wish I had the time to just do everything, try everything, and maybe who knows, one day I will. Um, yes, I resonate with that. Right. It's beautiful. And from a Vedanta point of view, again, it's that dream reality again. If we can make this more of a dream, why not? So basically, that's the question. Why not? We could, if we have that potential, we have that power, true power. That I call it true power, though, because it's it's the only power that exists. Really, I don't see anything else as power. So yeah, you're about to say something, Judy.
No, I just love what you're saying. And it's aligned power,
Yeah,
aligned with the
right,
trueness
right.
of self, right?
Yeah, yeah,
It's
that's it.
not
Yeah,
that false sense of power or false sense of
yeah,
strength or false sense
right.
of expression. There's
Mm,
authentic. There's so much about
yeah,
who are you at the basis of you, and
yeah,
then how much is overlaid over that, and then how many other overlays have you put on top of that. And I always use a book in front of
yeah,
the trueness of you, and then there's all these pages, all these
yeah,
layers.
yeah.
Why not come back to
Mm,
this?
yeah.
This is where the magic is.
Mm.
This is where you can still play doing everything that you do,
Yeah,
but you know that you're playing doing everything that you do. And it doesn't have to cause disease or illness or misalignment
right.
or you get to just
Yes,
be the lighthouse. You get to come from that point of reference of source.
yes,
You know you're one.
right.
And that
Hmm.
point of reference is your guide back to home, and it also helps others find their way home.
Mm,
So we're doing it for
yeah.
one another as well as ourselves. Essentially,
Ah.
it's the one showing up for the one. How fun is
Uh-huh.
that?
Yeah, right. Gosh, it's funny how throughout the conversation I had a question for you and you answered that question like without me asking the question. That's like, did you hear the question? That's amazing. Right? I was about to say that or ask the question about isn't it by changing ourselves that we can change the world? Oh, if this is the idea to change this reality, it is, isn't it? And I wonder why that's my because I'm always in deep contemplation and reflections around here how this reality is still like very much 50-50. I have heard that. I don't know about the percentage exactly, but that there are people who are closer to what you speak of, to what you're doing, perhaps where I'm at. But then there's this other half that they are not, and they are still creating a lot of chaos, within them. I mean, they're coming from a chaotic place, but they're not expressing that powerfully in a very genuine way. I don't think they are trying. They're just being themselves, I guess, from where they understand themselves to be.
So, to put a number on it would be maybe valuable in a moment or two. But you talked about it right in the beginning where we shifting the energy that we're showing up as, that affects the whole.
Mm,
Like if we go into quantum physics, anything
yeah.
that affects this
Yeah.
here goes, it ripples out into the quantum. And as a
Mm,
community, as a group of individuals
yeah.
that are all points of reference of the one, of source, we together create a bit of a tsunami.
Mm,
And then what is expressed from us
yeah.
looks different out there.
I
So as soon as we shift the energy here and that energy moves out into the quantum, that changes how everyone else sees or projects the projection as well. So yes,
mm,
as we
yeah.
work with the energies within ourselves and become energy masters, no longer being controlled by the identity, but using the identity to enhance
I
this fun thing that we're doing, we send that ripple out and it changes the balance. And then pretty
Yeah.
soon chaos
Yeah.
isn't able to be
Mm.
projected anymore because it's been shifted by all of us that have decided, yeah, no, I no longer am going
Yeah.
to be at war with
I
myself or others. So let's
mm,
just show up. Let's
mm,
literally show up and express and no longer give judgment. So I'm not trying to
yeah.
spend all my time getting everybody to be happy.
Right.
Okay. So I look at emotions as stories.
Mm,
All of these sensations and all of these beliefs come together to create a something that we translate as an emotion.
right.
So emotions are stories
Right.
too. So if we can come back to the
Right.
sensations, that's why I like to bring it back to the body. We come back to the sensations. We come out of the story of emotion.
Mm,
We can now play with the energy, but we
yeah.
keep the story alive. We're not able to shift the energy and we stay spellbound.
Right. Fixed. Yeah.
It's
Mm.
not something that I'm happy to play with.
Yes. Right.
And I encourage
Mm,
everyone else to take a look. Are you experiencing fear of failure? Guess what? You're probably experiencing fear of success too. No wonder
mm,
you're right here.
yeah.
Until we can come into and really take a look at where you're angry, where you're feeling discomfort in your body. We drop it back from anger to discomfort. As soon
Right.
as you recognize the discomfort and you bring it into your breath, that discomfort falls away and
Mm.
something shifted, whether it was the fear of death or the fear of life. And
Right.
now you've got this space that you can play in instead of being locked in.
Mm,
So I'm not even trying to get people to
right.
um, we're not trying to come away from the discomfort. We actually use
Mm,
discomfort
mm,
in order
mm,
to recognize where we're spellbound. And then as soon
mm,
as we release the spell binding, guess what's left?
yeah.
Every single emotion that you could ever imagine, but it's coming from an authentic place, not a accumulated place.
Right.
So everything is on the table still. You get the whole palette though. You don't just get
Yeah.
the a
Yeah.
6 crayon box. You get the like,
You the
the
yes.
whole
Uh-huh.
thing.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
because that's at the basis of you, that's who you are.
I love that.
You are
Yeah.
allowed to have every single color of every rainbow
Mm,
and
mm,
more colors that we haven't even identified yet.
mm. Gosh, I
And
love
it
the
comes
metaphor.
back to coming back to self, the trueness of self,
Yeah.
without all those overlays, overlays, overlays.
Yeah.
People pleasing, sugar coating. You cannot cover up a pile of garbage well enough for it to
Mm,
stop smelling.
mm.
You got to
Yeah.
deal with the garbage. So most of us are walking around with fear. Oh, but I'm strong. Oh, but I'm
Mm,
okay.
mhm.
Oh, but it's okay. Oh, it's a
Mm.
lesson. I'll give that a whole bunch more meaning. And so all these
Yeah.
layers and layers and layers, when at this, we have access to everything.
Yeah. Um,
Everything.
huh.
Give yourself that gift. Bring yourself back to yourself, the trueness of self.
Yeah. Gosh, Jody. Yeah, it's beautiful listening to you. I love the metaphor about the crayons. Like all these colors. Seems like we have learned to play just with a few colors. Yeah, that's what storytelling says to me. Or fixed anything.
Yeah.
Identities and all that. Yeah. I love that. That's just beautiful. And also as a reflection of the beautiful colors that appears behind you again. I'm like mesmerized by they look so magical to me. It's beautiful. Thank
Well,
you so much.
isn't that what life is supposed to be, is magical?
Yes.
Yeah, let's
Oh
come back to
gosh.
that.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
it. Oh my God, Jody. Yes,
yeah.
yes. Gosh. Thank you so much again for being you, for this beautiful expression of this, this body mind here. Just bringing again this you can call magical, I call the infinite energies, into this dream-like reality. It's just really, really beautiful. It reminds me again of a flower, blossoming. I can't help it. It has been coming to me almost as one color. This flower that when I see human beings kind of getting to know what they are, not even who, then it appears as a flower, like blossoming,
Mm.
and then kind of leaves its scent here and then it goes back and then keeps appearing again, probably in different bodies, who knows, or different planets with different realities. But that's for another conversation. Thank you so much again for your beautiful presence. Thank you for saying yes to this. And we'll be in touch again. We'll dance again one of these days. Your
Thank
website, YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, everything will be on the podcast notes, under the notes on YouTube, on my website, and everywhere else where this will be found. And is there anything that you left unsaid, Judy, for this
just
conversation?
thank you for having me, Valeria.
Thank
It's
you.
so
Thank you.
wonderful to talk to you and feel the flower of life.
Ah,
It's beautiful. You're wearing the same color, and it's such a representation of you,
ah,
that whole you that's within you all the time. So thanks
yes.
for showing up. Thank you for
Thank you.
today.